fight of her life. Hillary Clinton accepts the U.S. Democratic presidential nomination. Does she have what it takes to beat Donald Trump? Also on today's program, hacking a presidential election. U.S. intelligence agencies accuse Russia of meddling in the race. And in Picture This, eruption interrupted. Lava from Hawaii's Kilauea volcano flows into the Pacific Ocean. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Following years in the making, Hillary Clinton has finally secured her candidacy for President of the United States. After serving in the U.S. Senate, trying and failing at her first presidential run in 2008, and most recently competing in the primaries with surprise breakout candidate Bernie Sanders, the former U.S. Secretary of State accepted the Democratic nomination on Thursday. But what awaits her now is no ordinary battle. Stacked up against her is winning over the trust of a skeptical public following her FBI email scandal, unifying disillusioned Bernie Sanders supporters, and most of all, strategizing against one of the most untraditional Republican candidates in history. Today's newsmaker is Hillary Clinton, as we ask what it will take for her to win the U.S. presidency.
I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Hillary Clinton has made history, becoming the first female to accept a nomination to run for president for a major U.S. party.
I'm so happy this day has come. I'm happy for grandmothers and little girls.
After a campaign marked by controversy and scandal, this week's convention was about laying out why she's the Democrats' clear choice.
Hillary Clinton will make an outstanding president.
We must elect Hillary Clinton.
There has never been a man or a woman more qualified.
And that is our friend, Hillary Clinton.
Clinton now officially has the nod, but there are still deep divisions within the party. She has described this presidential election as a moment of reckoning.
Powerful forces are threatening to pull us apart. We have to decide whether we will all work together so we can all rise together.
But will she be able to get people to rally behind her and ensure her party is stronger together?
Bernie or bust! Bernie or bust! Bernie or bust!
The voices of angry Bernie Sanders fans heard outside and inside this week's convention.
Can I just say to the Bernie or bust people, you're being ridiculous.
They say they feel abandoned and betrayed by a rigged political system. And for many, Hillary Clinton is no better than Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders has tried to encourage unity.
Any objective observer will conclude that based on her ideas and her leadership, Hillary Clinton must become the next president.
And it seems he had some influence on the party's platform, with Clinton promising to create more jobs with rising wages and pay equality, to reform campaign financing and protect voters' rights, and reject unfair trade deals and support homegrown manufacturers. But will this be enough to get the vote of the Bernie or bust camp?
Trump is a risky, reckless, and radical choice.
You cannot believe one word that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth.
The Donald is not really a plans guy. He's not really a facts guy either.
A man you can bait with a tweet is not a man we can trust with nuclear weapons.
Donald Trump is proving to be a formidable opponent. The traditional political tactics to derail him seem to be having no impact. Fact-checking, shaming him for outrageous comments and flip-flops, and attacking his temperament are not working. While Clinton has been ahead of him in the polls, recent results show the gap is closing, and that many don't want either candidate. And these are the voters Hillary Clinton will now have to work out how to win over. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Philadelphia is Ahmed Bedier. He is a Florida delegate to the convention for Bernie Sanders, and from New York is adjunct associate research scholar at Columbia University, Lincoln Mitchell. Thanks both so much for joining us. First things first, I want to ask you both. Ahmed, I'll start with you. How do you think the convention went for Hillary Clinton and for the Democrats? Can we expect that bump that's supposed to come after every convention?
Well, the convention started out rocky, but ended on a very high note with a sense of unity. Sure, there are some people in the party that she did not win over yet. However, for the most part, it was a huge contrast with the Republican convention, where our party was successful in showcasing what American exceptionalism is. It's based on we're stronger together, strength through diversity, that we're stronger when we stick to American values that are based in the Constitution and protecting the rights of everyone involved. So in that sense, our convention at the party here, and I was there, ended on a very high note, which was carefully curated throughout the week.
But Ahmed, it did start out rocky, in no small part because Bernie Sanders supporters really highlighted that there was some disunity in the party. Do you think it was wise for them to do that? And do you think the party's gotten fully past it now?
Well, we can't blame the Bernie delegates for what happened. After all along, Bernie supporters have felt that the party was tilting the scales towards Hillary, that they were working against Bernie. And the WikiLeaks, the email scandal that came out just a few days before the convention started, proved that. They knew that all along. Some people felt that that was cheating, that Hillary did not win the primary fair and square. And the party started out, the convention started out on a rocky way because the party mishandled the crisis, rather than coming out and just simply saying that, hey, we messed up and here are the steps that we're going to do to make sure this never happens again. They tried to actually push Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the limelight, starting out with Monday morning at a breakfast at the Florida delegation where she was booed off, and they had no other choice but to have her step aside for party unity. That didn't necessarily appease everyone because shortly after that she was actually appointed as an honorary chair to the Hillary campaign. There's the fault of the party unity falls back on the party, not necessarily the Bernie delegates.
Okay, Lincoln, let me get your take on how you just think the convention actually went.
Well, the convention went very well for the Democrats. And I think last night what you really saw was a contrast. On the one side, the Democratic Party was saying stronger together, which is it's a bit of a platitude, but it's a platitude that should resonate with all Americans, regardless of background, and also regardless of party. And the Republican platform was summed up with I alone, which is not so much a platitude, but something that should strike terror in the field, the hearts not just of all Americans, but of anybody who believes in democracy. I alone is not a message that a country that is democratic should embrace. And that contrast was very strong. The Democratic Party, they went into this with some tensions for some of the reasons described. The handling of the WikiLeaks was not done well. And frankly, the constant talk from Sanders' people, well into probably late June, early July, that an election that they did lose pretty clearly was stolen from them, didn't help either. But they came out of this very unified. I would say unified enough. The challenge for the Democratic Party here and for Hillary Clinton is not to get every last Bernie or Buster, but it's to win more votes in the key states than the other guy. And right now they're in a position where they can do that. That really is what it's about. It's not, I've heard some say that can she win over some Trump supporters? That seems like an impossibility, to be honest with you. But can she win over the undecided voters with what happened last week and with her message going forward? Yes, she can. And the way to think about this is that a Hillary Clinton message, if Hillary Clinton, I'm going to get numbers here for one moment, if Hillary Clinton can get 42% or so of straight white female voters, she will win this election. It won't be close. By 11 o'clock Eastern time on election night, they'll be drinking champagne at the Democratic National Committee. That seems doable. That's the kind of persuasion that needs to happen. And we saw a convention, not just the wonderful speech by Michelle Obama and the historic speech by Hillary Clinton, but I would draw your attention to two speeches we saw, which I think will be key messages for Clinton if she wants to win this thing. One was the mayor of my city, the former mayor of my city, Michael Bloomberg, who laid out a case from a more conservative than most Democrats' position, saying, look, I'm basically an independent, kind of a conservative guy. Donald Trump is a fraud. And he made that case clearly coming from a real billionaire who really has built and run a good business and who really has governing experience. And he laid it out very clearly. And the other one speech, which is a key message speech, which was a little overlooked, is the one the vice president gave. Joe Biden, in American politics, is the guy who puts his arm around the 35-year-old right-winger mouthing off in the bar in an avuncular way and says, son, you're full of crap. And Joe Biden's stories about middle-class America, about the background from which he comes, really does resonate with a lot of those white middle-class, lower middle-class voters who are with Trump in big numbers. And Hillary doesn't have to win those votes. She has to peel away some. And the messaging in Biden's speech is the messaging that will do that. It won't be just Joe Biden. It'll be the commercials. It'll be the other surrogates. It'll be the social media. But that's what we will begin to see going forward. And if she does that, she has a real shot at winning this.
Okay, Ahmed, let me ask you, do you worry at all about the so-called statement voters, the Bernie or bust people who may decide to either not cast their vote at all or cast some kind of moral vote, the way we saw Ralph Nader supporters do back in 2000 that actually cost Al Gore the election?
Well, that is obviously a concern. And, you know, at the party, there was a lot of talk about Donald Trump and fear of Donald Trump and how he's unqualified. And in any other election year, Donald Trump should not even stand a chance. He's not qualified to run for president or to be president. And Hillary Clinton, on paper and her credentials, she's probably the most qualified person to ever run and be ready for president. But the mood in the electorate is different this year. It's an anti-establishment year. She shouldn't be having a hard time to be able, or the race should not be this close. So she's going to need, Hillary Clinton and our party is going to need every single voter to be able to vote for her, especially in those swing states. Florida, the state that I'm from, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, those states are really critical. And she's going to have to not only worry about the fear of Donald Trump and how crazy he is, but actually earn the votes of those people in those states. And that's going to include some of the people that were supporting Bernie Sanders, but it's also going to include independents and possibly some Republicans as well. And she's going to have to do that by earning their votes. And what's working against her is her unfavorability rating. There are some people that just simply don't like Hillary Clinton for whatever reason. She's been in the spotlight for so long, has been under attack for so many years. People feel like she's part of the establishment in a year where establishment politics is not really favored.
Okay, Lincoln, I'd just like to get some final words from you before we wrap up based on what Ahmed's take was.
One thing I would say is that every year in American politics, and if you go back and do the archival history, you'll see this at least going back to 1976, is framed to the electorate as an outsider year. Now, Hillary Clinton is a consummate insider. She's the establishment candidate. There's no possible doubt about that. But she can win in this year. 1968, 1976, 1980, 1992, 2000, 2008. These are years that were all described as outsider years. An insider candidate, and in many of those years, an insider candidate won. Hillary Clinton's challenge with the Sanders supporters is the following. And I've seen this in my people I know, and I have many, many friends who supported Sanders. And right now, they fall into two groups. The big majority are saying, she's not perfect, but I'm with her because this election is important. And I think the gentleman from Florida seems to have that view. But stop me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in his mouth. And then there's a small few that are saying, I will never vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein, who's the Green Party candidate. But those people, at least the ones who I know, they never voted Democrat anyway. So it's not as if Hillary Clinton is hemorrhaging Democratic votes who went with Sanders and are now leaving the party. She has not as successful as she might perhaps like to be in bringing those independents, those Greens, those others on the kind of left-wing activist place into the Democratic Party. But she can win without those if she runs a successful persuasion campaign. And despite her high negatives, she has the advantage of running against Donald Trump, who's one of the few political figures with even higher negatives.
Okay, Lincoln, we're going to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for that, but do stay with us. But thank you so much, Ahmed, for joining us live there from Philadelphia. Still to come on the Newsmakers, after the DNC email leak our previous guests mentioned, U.S. intelligence agencies are pointing the finger at Russia. Will it put more focus on cybersecurity? And in picture this, lava spilling out of a Hawaiian volcano for the last 2 months finally reaches the ocean. The The start of the U.S. Democratic National Convention was overshadowed by a scandal that could have been written by Hollywood. A hacker known as Guccifer 2.0 leaked a massive load of emails and other documents revealing the inner workings of the organization that oversees the running of the U.S. Democratic Party. Now, it led to the resignation of the chair of the DNC and left party officials scrambling to discover who was behind it. As more evidence points to the hacker having links to Russia, it has appeared to have unleashed a new realm in international cyber warfare. Christine Perovolakis has more.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
A U.S. Republican nominee calling on a foreign power to spy on his rival. The U.S. is still investigating whether Russia is behind the cyber attack on the Democratic National Committee that led to a leak of internal party emails on the eve of the Democratic Party convention. WikiLeaks published 20,000 messages. The emails reveal that staffers worked to help Hillary Clinton secure the nomination over her rival, Bernie Sanders. The fallout was swift, forcing the chairwoman of the DNC to step down. But in the new era of cyber espionage, the FBI is investigating whether the Russian government is behind the hacking and whether Moscow is trying to manipulate the U.S. presidential election.
We have to make cyberspace safer. We have to improve cooperation across the board.
From corporate hacking attacks, fraud, and identity theft, cybersecurity has never been more important for businesses, organizations, and governments. And U.S. President Barack Obama seems to take it seriously. He has now put the FBI in charge of responding to all cyber threats, whether from other countries, terrorists, or criminals. Cybercrime costs the global economy an estimated $300 billion a year and costs the U.S. around $100 billion annually. Companies in Silicon Valley are trying to keep up with ever more advanced attacks on their systems. The most high-profile strikes have hit retailers like Target and Home Depot. And cyber attacks on U.S. companies are growing, with severe repercussions. China has been accused of hacking into U.S. companies to steal secrets for economic gain. But this is not just an American problem. NATO says cyberspace is the new front in the global war. It is estimated that total global cybersecurity spending will exceed $170 billion by 2020.
Defending cyberspace is equally as important as what we did with defending the landscape in years gone by.
Countries and companies are adopting defensive strategies. Singapore has decided to cut off internet access to computers used by government employees. Big companies and governments are now hiring hackers and former spies to fight cybercrime. But is this enough in the age of cyber espionage, where attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated by the day? Christine Perovolakis, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining us now from San Francisco is Billy Rios. He is the founder of the cybersecurity startup Whitescope. And also joining us is Lincoln Mitchell again from New York. Thanks both so much. Billy, let me start with you. In the case of the DNC email hack, what do these hackers want? I mean, we've heard accusations that they're trying to influence the U.S. election, but to what end?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that they are trying to influence the election. If you look at the nature of the information that they disclosed and the timing, more importantly, I think it would be naive to think that the DNC networks are more secure than the RNC networks. So it's probably likely that they have access to other data for other political parties. But they chose to release the data for only one party, right? And so I think it's pretty obvious that they're trying to influence the outcome of an election. This is a way that they can reach hundreds of millions of voters in a couple swift actions. And so I think, just based on the information that they released and the timing of the release, it's pretty straightforward. They're trying to influence voters.
If I could just jump in, Russia wants Trump to win this election. I think we should be very clear about that. Trump's position has been that he will perhaps take the U.S. out of NATO, which would be an absolute win for Moscow. He has said that he can work with Putin. in a way suggesting a friendly relationship. He doesn't seem to understand that for many, Putin is seen as an adversary. He has indicated that he would revisit the question of recognizing an independent Crimea, something that is anathema to most in NATO and certainly to Ukraine. So he is a candidate, and I have had my colleagues who are Russian, who are not necessarily close, supporters of the Russian government, have told me that Russia very much wants Trump to win this election. The Kremlin very much wants Trump to win this election. Additionally, they don't like Hillary Clinton. They see Hillary Clinton as tough. They see her as an anti-Russia hawk. And in fact, in 2011, President Putin, or I think it was then Prime Minister Putin, suggested that Hillary Clinton was behind demonstrations following fraudulent elections in Russia. So it's very clear that Russia has a horse in this race and why they are supporting that candidate.
Okay, Billy, let me ask you, do you think strategically, though, it's a bit foolish for Russia and China, Russia in particular in this case, to have exposed themselves for perpetrating these cyber attacks? Shouldn't they have been working a little more discreetly and perhaps save their armory for something much bigger that could really work in their national security interest?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? So we have to remember a couple things. So first, whoever released this, whether it's Russia or someone else, they get to pick which data they release, right? So they get to craft this message and form this message the way they want to form it. And so that's very important. To believe that this is all the data that they have, that's pretty naive. Like I said before, I would say that the network security of the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, is probably, or the committee, is probably the same as the RNC, right? And so to think that the RNC has much better security than the DNC, that's pretty naive. They probably have access to a lot of different data, whoever this is, and they decided which data to release, when to release it, and how to release it. So that's a very important piece. The second thing to think about is, I know a lot of folks are pointing the finger at Russia here, but really, this could be anyone, right? And so, we're looking at the evidence, and a lot of people are drawing conclusions based on what they've seen, but this could be a non-state-sponsored actor. This could be another state-sponsored actor making this look like Russia. I think the whole point is that you have the ability for a foreign actor, whoever that may be, to influence a U.S. election, right? That's just what happened here. And so whether it's a state-sponsored agency from Russia, whether it's China, whether it's someone else, the fact that an external organization can influence a U.S. election is a big deal, right? So I think eventually we'll figure out who this is and who did this. But for right now, whoever did this, they've already reached millions of voters with what they did.
But Billy, logistically, technically, how difficult is it for the United States to fight these hackers?
I think we just saw it, right? The data is already out there. Even if we do figure out who did this and how they did that, they've already reached hundreds of millions of voters, right? They've already released the data. They've already made it so where it's publicly accessible. Anyone right now with a web browser can go and listen to recorded voicemail messages that were sent to the DNC. They can go read emails that were sent on the DNC network. Anyone can do this. And so even if they figure out who did this and how they did it, the damage is already done. Millions of voters have already been reached. They've already put their message out there. They've already controlled the way that this data has been released, and you can't take it back. It's not like you can say, okay, we're going to shut off the internet for a while and try to remove all, it's over. Anyone that wants to listen to these voicemails or read the emails, they can do so whenever they want.
Lincoln, go ahead.
Well, a couple things. First, this also reveals a weakness of our political institutions. We have seen, we don't know if it's Russian, I think Mr. Rios is right about that, but we've also have seen Russia pursue similar tactics of supporting kind of far-right and far-left parties throughout Europe. We kind of thought in the United States our institutions are stronger, they wouldn't get involved. If it is Russia, that we have shown our institutions to be weaker than we thought, and at least they see it that way. But the second piece of this is that even if it's not Russia, right, because Mr. Rios is right, this could be an independent actor, it could be China, we don't know who did this exactly, but even if it's not Russia, the comments that Donald Trump made following this are extraordinary. That he would invite a foreign power to release more data, perhaps to hack more, is unprecedented. This is the most important national security issue to come up in the context of a political campaign, at least in my lifetime.
Lincoln Mitchell and Billy Rios, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. In today's Picture This, molten lava meets the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii for the first time in years. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker was Hillary Clinton as we asked what it will take for her to win the U.S. presidency. The former Secretary of State is the first woman to lead a major presidential ticket in the U.S. But the battle has just begun as she strives to win over the trust of a skeptical public, unifying her party and reinventing her political strategy against one of the most untraditional Republican candidates in history. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Goodbye for now.